Okay, it looks like we're live on YouTube. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait until the URL comes up, and then I'll drop that onto Parler and invite people to join us. Even though we're streaming live now, there's no one there. They don't know to expect me at this URL. So I will grab it and get my old feedback out of my ear. We are almost there. Everybody welcome Nadine Strossen. Let me also get it so we've got you and me side by side in a nice gallery view instead. And let's see here. Let me get Parler to come up. There we are. Okay. I'll tell them live now. Okay, here we go. Okay, now. Okay, there we are. Okay, so Nadine, welcome. How are you?
I'm excellent. I'm so happy to be back in conversation with you, Amy. So sorry about all the adversity Parler has been subject to.
Yeah, it's been a crazy 2021 already. We don't know what the rest holds in store. We're hoping it's going to be a lot better for everyone. I thank you for giving me a little bit of your time today. As I told you, there are a couple of issues that I really wanted to discuss with you. We can have another long conversation another day, but today is just several minutes or so. But for those people who are not familiar with you and your past work with the ACLU, and now you are a professor emeritus at New York Law School, I wanted to introduce them to your book, which I have found incredibly inspiring in my work doing policy for Parler. It's called Hate: Why We Should Resist It with Free Speech, Not Censorship. And if you could introduce the audience, for those people who aren't familiar with it, to the thesis of your book. I think those people who said, oh, ACLU, she must be liberal, she's not really a friend of ours, are going to be changing their tune a little bit when they hear this.
Thank you so much, Amy. Well, I actually do consider myself a liberal in two senses of the word. Both, I am a bleeding heart liberal in terms of public policy, but more to the point, I consider myself a classical liberal in terms of staunchly adhering to and defending against ongoing attacks the notions that come out of the Enlightenment, including rationality and freedom of speech and academic freedom, intellectual inquiry, open discourse. And precisely because those values have been under attack for at least the last half dozen years or so, in particular from people who label themselves liberals and progressives, I wanted to make another try, because I've been trying throughout my adult lifetime to make this case, another try to persuade people that no matter what their own political values and beliefs are, it behooves them to staunchly defend the most robust freedom of speech, even, indeed, especially for ideas that are antithetical to their own, including ideas that other people and they themselves may label as hateful. And Amy, although the book focuses on hate speech, the points that I make fully apply to any kind of controversial speech. Today, also controverted in addition to hate speech is so-called misinformation, disinformation, extremist speech, terrorist speech. All of these categories of speech that are targeted for censorship share one thing in common, one fatal flaw in terms of the censorship proposals, and that is that the concepts are inherently vague and subjective.
Yes.
One person's hated speech is somebody else's cherished speech. One person's disinformation or fake news is somebody else's absolutely, credible, positive, true belief. And for this reason, we cannot, as thinking people with our own values, seeking out our own ideas and to instill them perhaps in our own young children, we cannot delegate those inherently subjective decisions to anybody else, either a government official, and I don't care whether it's a Republican, Democrat, liberal, or conservative, I don't want somebody else making that decision for me. And I also don't want that decision being made for me by a powerful social media company, by big tech, either by an underpaid human being, wage slave, or by an algorithm. And that's why, by the way, I am so supportive of Parler's effort to be an open platform that would disallow only speech that is not constitutionally protected, but leave it to individual users to make their own decisions beyond that as to what they do want to see or what they don't want to see.
Right. And that's been the focus of Parler all along. That was the impetus for it to be founded originally, as I understand it, although I was not working for Parler at that time, but that's why I joined, because Parler believes that the individuals are the ones who are most qualified to curate their own feeds, so to speak, that individuals should be able to decide what they're going to read, hear, see, say, and then ultimately think, right? Because we all, as human beings, end up having to think for ourselves if we're going to take the actions that are best for us to have a flourishing life. And that's really what it's all about for me. So thank you. So everybody who wants to read more about her thesis in her primary book, Hate Speech, go get this book. Again, Nadine Strossen, Why We Should Resist Hate Speech with Free Speech, Not Censorship. So it's hate, why we should resist it with free speech, not censorship, available at your favorite book outlet. So grab it, definitely. There are two issues that I want to talk about with you that have come up of late. And one of them is in connection with the recent response that we had to make to Congress, because we were, I believe, unfairly singled out for investigation after the events of January 6th. And part of the response included the fact that when there were certain pieces of violent or inciting content, threatening or inciting content, that, when it was reported to us, we sometimes referred that content to law enforcement. And, we in effect warned them that we were hearing about these events of January 6th that might take place. And of course, these are publicly posted pieces of content, just forwarding screenshots to them and leaving it up to the professionals to decide whether it warranted further investigation, including presenting process to Parler if necessary, et cetera. That's, the method that we used. So then my question for you is, were we somehow infringing on free speech rights of people if we were doing that? Because that's a question that has been presented by our users.
I think the answer to that is no, Amy, but with one caveat. Ideally, you would have stated in your terms of service that that would be your practice. I know last time I looked at the terms of service, which admittedly was a while ago, they very clearly stated that speech that was illegal, including speech that constituted threats of violence or intentional incitement of imminent violence or conspiracies or plans or material support for actually carrying out violence, is not constitutionally protected. So I think that your users should have been on notice that it's not constitutionally protected, and therefore Parler said it's not going to be protected on our site as well. If that was made clear, I think that's really important. Then there can't be any argument that you misled us and we thought we were going to be secure in having free speech rights to engage in that kind of speech. And also, ideally, you would notify the users that you would pass on, or at least have feel free to pass on to government officials, to law enforcement officials, any such content. So I think, to be, even above and beyond what your legal duties would be, to be completely fair and transparent, provide the maximum notice to your users. I think that's commendable.
Right, right. Now, it's, obviously, I don't think there's any legal duty to do it, but it's true that anybody who is on the platform, and in fact, a lot of the things that ever were reported were not even reported primarily by us, right? So sometimes law enforcement will present a platform with some legal process that resulted because somebody else, a user was on Parler and happened to see something and then sent it on as a tip. Anybody can report such publicly posted content to law enforcement at any time.
Law enforcement could be on your site to be looking for.
Yeah, they might be on themselves as well.
And,
right?
and I think that's a really, really important point. Thank you for underscoring it. There is no legal duty to do this. I'm saying
Right.
you're acting as a good citizen here. And I think you're being fair toward the whole society by trying to protect us against potential danger, including to democracy itself. But then you're also being fair to users by telling them that you might be doing this. The reason why there is no duty, and I think it would be constitutionally impermissible to make it a duty to report such content, is that implies at least that there's an obligation on the part of the platform to monitor what their users are posting in a systematic way. And that would be deeply inconsistent with individual privacy and with free speech.
Well, and then the other thing about it is, even if you are using some sort of algorithmic method to try to find some of this content, all of those are inherently imperfect. And so trying to put some duty behind this is going to result in problems because, again, the tech is just is not there. So then thank you for that. And then one other question. So if you indeed want to protect the maximum amount of freedom of expression, and at the same time, you want to recognize that individuals have a freedom of association such that maybe they don't want to associate online with people who want to spread porn, for example, or even though it's best to resist hate with free speech, maybe they say, not today, I really don't want to go fight Nazis or whatever the stereotype is, right? They say, I would not like that in my feed. If a private platform gives people tools that they can choose whether to use or not to filter out this content that, while legally protected, maybe they don't want to see, then that in and of itself is still consistent with the spirit of freedom of expression, is it not?
It is the essence of the spirit of freedom of expression, which comes down to, and I think this is true for privacy, which I know is your great expertise as well, they both come down to individual freedom of choice. And that means a choice to not see something, hear something, answer something, as well as the choice to do it. In fact, the United States Supreme Court has said, compelled speech, being forced to engage in speech or to be confronted with speech that you choose not to, is at least as, or to associate with somebody that you don't want to, is at least as violative of freedom as the opposite, being prevented from doing so. And so my ideal social media platform would be one that maximized individual freedom of choice, that it wouldn't, even if it were, a uniform policy that everybody is going to get everything that is constitutionally protected. That means that the government could not censor. That would not be ideal for me, Amy. I think the ideal would be, well, I might not want to see everything that's constitutionally protected, just as you gave in your excellent examples.
Okay, so in terms of where we're going forward, which is to continue to put control into the hands of individual users as to what they see on their feed. I mean, we even, for example, have filter that you can program yourself. And I can say, for example, I don't know how you are on pineapple pizza, but I am not a big pineapple pizza fan. And so if I want to put into my feed on, into my moderation panel on Parler, that I don't want to see the phrase pineapple pizza in my feed, then I can do that on Parler. It's a little silly, but there might be other terms and things that you just don't want to hear about. And you can choose to do that if you want.
I'm very squeamish person. So if I could get rid of blood images, which I do this way, the old-fashioned way, when I'm watching something on Netflix, for example, it
Yes.
would be really helpful to me.
That is part of our NSFW filter, by the way. So if you do choose to get involved in the realm of social media, we have an effective filter for that if you would like to zoom over to Parler. Unfortunately, she is so busy that she doesn't even have a social media account. So, maybe someday we'll talk you into it, Nadine, right?
Always open to persuasion, as you know.
I promised I'm only going to take a few minutes of your time, so I'm going to let you go. But I want to ask, do you want to plug any of the projects that you're busily working on right now?
I'm mostly doing speaking, mostly on college campuses, including law schools, because there is just such a pall of orthodoxy that's descending over the campuses. And since I've been told that many users of Parler are conservative or libertarian, they may well be very concerned about something that I find extremely troubling on campuses recently, law school campuses in particular. And that is that a prominent conservative libertarian organization, namely the Federalist Society, which is represented on just about every law school campus, there's really a systematic effort to boycott its programs and its speakers. The Federalist Society, when it was founded, was the only organization that existed to promote discussion and debate about civil liberties and constitutional law issues. It was seeking to enrich the law school campus culture, which then was predominantly liberal. I think it's become even more predominantly liberal and progressive since then. And from the beginning, the Federalist Society said we were a group of conservatives and libertarians, so some diversity right there. And every single event had to involve at least two speakers with two different perspectives. So from the very beginning, even though I was then, as I am now, a card-carrying libertarian, sometimes I call myself a libertarian, I have frequently been invited to speak by Federalist Society forums, including their campus chapters. And one of the other requirements was that students, the law school chapter of the FedSoc would co-sponsor with other student organizations with different ideological outlooks. So this was truly a way of stimulating discourse and the exchange of ideas. And until very recently, every time, which was very regularly, that I was speaking under the auspices of the FedSoc, other student organizations would co-sponsor, including something called the American Constitution Society, which was a liberal counterpart that was formed quite a bit later to counter the influence of the Federalist Society. And starting this year, I think probably after January 6th is what triggered it, there has been an effort to stop FedSoc in its tracks. So other on many campuses, fortunately not on all campuses, but on too many campuses, the ACS and other student organizations are refusing to co-sponsor, even when the speaker is a liberal. And even the campus ACLU chapters have refused to co-sponsor at a couple events where I've been invited by the Federalist Society. There have been efforts to decertify a couple Federalist Society chapters as hate groups on their campuses. And the reasoning, if that's what you can call it, is extremely bothersome to be coming from law students who should be able to argue logically. But one of the arguments is, well, Josh Hawley, with his famous fist pump gesture, seemingly in support of the insurrection on January 6th. He is a member of the Federalist Society, and he was the president of the Yale Law School Federalist Society when he was a student. Therefore, the Federalist Society is evil and responsible for January 6th, and therefore we cannot collaborate with them in any way.
That is so fallacious. And this is the thing that gets me with respect to any of these people who want to just silence their opposition. Why do they feel so insecure about the rightness of their point of view
And
that the only thing they can do is force us out, right? Because that's what they're doing. They're saying this is so dangerous that they want to actually say things. And it seems that they lack confidence in the truth and the rightness of their view.
And also to necessarily assume that it's the opposition. I'm a founding member of the American Constitution Society. That's where my overall value.
Oh, wow.
But I would never describe the Federalist Society as the opposition. I consider many of its members and leaders to be friends and colleagues. When I speak at their behest, I'm speaking about free speech. I'm speaking about values that every ACLU member supports as well. So that binary assumption that you're either an enemy or you're
right.
I find extremely troublesome, especially when we're talking about the future lawyers and judges of this country. On a positive note, tonight I will be speaking for a Federalist Society chapter at Laverne University Law School in California, near Los Angeles. And that event is being co-sponsored by the American Constitution Society and the Federalist Society. And the student leaders of both have told me that they continue to collaborate enthusiastically with each other. So I want to hold that up as a positive example. I only have anecdotal evidence, but my anecdotal evidence is that it is the more prestigious law schools where we're seeing the tendency that I've complained about. And when I talk to my friends at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, they say the same thing, that free speech is most embattled at the most prestigious and elite and selective universities, not at community colleges, not at state university systems on the whole.
See, and you would think that the elite universities, the so-called, where they're very selective and they want the people who are the brightest in our country to be students there, that they would encourage people to think for themselves, because it's by thinking for yourself that you're going to be creative and come up with the next great idea, whether it's in, entrepreneurship, innovation, policy, anywhere. They're just shutting down thought. And that's the scariest in the world. But we'll all have to adjust accordingly. And we'll have to send kids to the non-elite schools if they're going to get a real education anymore, it seems. I thank you. I thank you for doing this, because, going out and fighting the good fight on all these different fronts.
Well, right back at you, Amy.
And for speaking with me today. So hopefully we'll get to speak again in the not too distant future when you've got more time. But we'll both Zoom and do our busy things now, and we'll share news in between, okay?
I look forward to it. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.